Okay. So some people look at fat bikes and they're, kind of scared off by the fact there are these monstrous tires and they seem a little intimidating. But fat bikes are actually very confidence inspiring once you get out on them. The large tires run at a lower pressure, which allows them to soak up a lot of the bumps and roots and rocks that you ride over, but it also allows them to float on top of snow. And that was their original intention when fat bikes were first introduced in Minnesota, of course, because it's a Minnesota frame, but also in Alaska, which is another place where they started to come about. And of course, it was for people who wanted to go ride their bikes in the snow, but they work really well on dry trails as well when there's no snow present. And there's no suspension fork either, because having a suspension fork would be redundant with a 4-inch tire because the tire soaks up on everything. Also, if you're out in the really cold, not having a suspension fork means you don't have a suspension fork to fail in really cold weather. Another great thing about fat bikes too is that they come with disc brakes, they come with really easy gearing just like a mountain bike would. Certainly fat bikes are a derivative of a mountain bike. They have normal mountain bike geometry, so they're very upright, they're very stable and predictable, which makes them great for riding around on trails in the snow. Another really cool feature that fat bikes have that are different from regular mountain bikes, just notice that the bars are wrapped with cork tape as opposed to a regular handlebar grip, so that your hands stay warmer when it's cold outside. So these bikes are designed and conceptualized to be outside in the cold, whereas regular mountain bikes aren't necessarily made specifically for cold weather riding, but these are. So, hi, I'm AJ from the Tiny Corner Bike Shop, and I am here in Herrington Manor, and I'm going over this framed Minnesota 2.0 fat bike, and just kind of doing a safety check on it to make sure that it's going to be good to go. And so I just checked the tire pressure, and the minimum and maximum tire pressure for all tires, all bike tires, is normally listed right on the side of the tire. Sometimes it's in black and it's really hard to find, but and this one was a little tricky to find. So just making sure that the tires are properly inflated. And then before that, I was also checking and just pedaling the bike to make sure that it was shifting correctly. So I started at the bottom of the gears and I was working my way up to see if there's any sort of clicking or any sort of noises that were happening with the rear derailleur, and also going back and forth on the front derailleur to make sure that it was shifting correctly. And while I'm doing that, I'm also feeling how the shifters operate and whether or not there's any sort of stickiness or any sort of hesitation, which gives me a good indication of whether or not the cables might need cleaned and lubed, or whether or not there might be stuff in the actual shifter body that might be causing it to slow down. And then when I rode the bike in here, I also checked the brakes to get a good feeling of whether or not they were strong enough and they would be sufficient for stopping. So that's just a really quick overview of what I check, and then I'll also go through and I'll check to make sure the headset is tight by kind of slamming on the front brakes and making sure it's not jangling around in there, and then I'll check the crankset to make sure the bottom bracket feels like it is tight, and then just giving a wiggle on both tires to make sure the hubs feel like they are tight. So that'll get you ballpark about whether or not your bike is safe and ready to go. And the last thing I do, which home mechanics may or may not have, is I go over the whole bike with a torque wrench to make sure everything is properly torqued and safe, so that nothing is going to come loose while the rider is out in the wild. So, yeah.